and welcome. Aquarister here, back with another video, and today is a big day. It is our first build video of Season 3, and specifically our Life Staff Flail video. Now, I've been talking about this build since the PTR. I had so much fun in the PTR playing around with it. It took me a little bit to figure out exactly how I wanted it, but by live, I knew exactly the build that I was going for as far as the mastery and all that goes. The gear took me a little bit longer than expected to get together, but I was out of town for a few days, was sick for a few days, but we are finally here. I finally have my build together, so that is what we are going to be looking at today because I've been having so much fun with it. I have to share it with all of you. So that is what we'll be looking at, is my Life Staff Flail video. Before we fully get into today's video, I do just want to say, if you like this video, please do drop it a like. It does help me out a lot. And if you'd like to see more content like this, including a bunch more build videos that I have planned coming, definitely subscribe to the channel so you can see when those new videos go live. I also stream throughout the week on Twitch, so if you do want to see me working on some of these builds live, ask any questions or suggestions, anything like that, definitely stop by a stream over on Twitch. We would love to have you lurk, hang out, chat, anything you want to do. We just kind of hang out, have fun, and just work on our New World stuff. But let's get into today's video. Alright, so it has been a hot minute since I made a build video. So we are going to take it slow, work our way through this build because so much has changed since Season 3 has dropped, and there's just a lot to go over. Now, I do plan on doing a specific Life Staff video where I'm going to go over my build in more depth and talk about the various Life Staff builds that I like to run. But today we're just going to be going over my Splash of Light build. It's what I had a lot of fun with last season in Season 3, or in Season 2, and then with Season 3, I wanted to play around with it, and I love it even more because of the perks that they added. So we are going to start out with the armor, and we will slowly go through some of this. So with my helmet, I did go with the Spore Light. I crafted it up to have refreshing on it. So we have the physical version, refreshing health. For my chest piece, I did end up going with the Nimble Coat because I wanted that extra cooldown reduction, and I am absolutely loving having the extra cooldown reduction. I ran the build without the Nimble Coat for a very long time because it took me a while to actually pull it, but once I pulled it, it was amazing, the cooldown reduction. I was really happy with it. Those extra 2 stacks of refreshing, due to the highly refreshing, makes a really big difference. You do get the health, and then I put it elemental aversion on it because elemental aversion across the board will work for me on various different builds. For the gloves, I ended up crafting some Emperor Zhao gloves. Those do give you magnify, physical aversion, health, and then I put refreshing, or no, it had refreshing and health, and then I put it put physical aversion on it when I crafted it. So through the dense mutated materia, I actually ended up crafting this and got lucky on getting physical aversion for the roll. For the pants, these are probably the luckiest loot drop that I've gotten so far. The day I was going to be crafting my Fortifying Sacred Ground, I opened up an OPR cache, and this is what I ended up getting, which was the Vigor Refreshing Fortifying Sacred Ground. Really nice perk and pants to have. Refreshing, Vigor's not bad. There's so many dots in the game right now, so having that was really nice. Refreshing, obviously, just to get the extra stack, and then the Fortifying Sacred Ground. For the boots, I just crafted these, ended up getting Elemental Aversion, Purity of Light, which is what I chose for my 2 perks, and then using the Chromatic Seal, Scarab, all that. It ended up giving me Thrust Conditioning, which I'm not too upset with, being that this is more of a healer build, and these boots specifically are healer boots. I do take a lot of thrust damage, whether that's in OPR or like archers in the open world. A lot of that thrust damage can get mitigated just by having more of that thrust conditioning and other thrust resistance, which I will get into. Let's hop into the jewelry next. We'll do the weapons last. So for the jewelry, this is the amulet that I ended up crafting because I was going to go out and farm some of the other named amulets and maybe craft it with chromatic seals, but that involves 3 chromatic seals. It was too expensive, took me too long to gather that many. So I ended up crafting it, and this is what I got. Now, again, thrust protection was not going to be my first choice for a perk, but I am not upset with it. It is a 700 gear score item. It has health divine, which is what I was looking for, and then it has the thrust protection. So overall, really happy with the amulet. With the mithril items as well, you are able to swap out those gems, so that makes it even better yet. For the ring, I ended up crafting this ring as well, and I actually used a prismatic scarab because I had a prismatic scarab and the inductor from day 1. Didn't know what I wanted to use it on, and then eventually I was like, you know what, we're just going to dump it into a ring so I can get exactly what I want. Now, for your ring, you do have multiple options. Hardy Sacred needs to be on the ring for a healer. For the third perk, a lot of healers are running Healing Breeze, which is not a bad perk by any means. I do recommend it still. But for me personally, I've always ran nature damage. I like having that extra damage. And then when I run my other secondaries, whether that's hammer, spear, anything like that, as long as I have that amber slotted in it, then that's also getting a buff. So I do like having a little extra DPS myself, but definitely if you want to go for more healing output, go with Healing Breeze. It is a bit more expensive as well, thus why I didn't go that route immediately. But it is a very good perk to have if you don't go with nature damage. But there is a ring out there through the new dungeon. If you have the materia, you can actually craft, I think it's called Gorilla's Strength or something like that, but it's the ring from there, and that actually has, I believe it's hardy nature damage. So then when you roll it, you have a chance of getting Sacred. Sacred has a pretty high drop chance on it, so you can definitely go that route instead of spending the money like I did. For my earring, this is actually a Tanglevine earring that I pulled a long while back. Refreshing Toast and Nimble were the two perks that I really wanted, so the Tanglevine earring matched that perfectly. And then the Fortifying Toast, honestly, I'm pretty happy with it, and I might actually run that in general for my next earring, because obviously this is my only item that is not currently 700, and so I do need to replace it, but I think I'm gonna go with the exact same thing, so that's kind of why I haven't changed it at all, or it's very, very low priority for me to change that. All right, on to the weapons. Now, I did make a video on my life staff, so if you've not seen that, I will put it in the description below so you can go and check that out. Exactly how I got this life staff, where I farmed it, all of that. So I do have a video on that. I will put it in the description below, but I have been absolutely loving this life staff. It is fantastic. It's everything I was hoping for. I don't plan on using another life staff anytime soon, even for the other life staff perks. I have absolutely loved this. Purifying Breeze is amazing. Even if it gets nerfed, anything like that, I absolutely love it. I always love heavy attacks with a life staff, and the fact that now the functionality of it is even better, because now when we're removing the debuffs from people with our heavies, we are also healing them. Again, even if they end up nerfing this, I'm still going to run it because I think it is just a fantastic perk to have. I really, really like it, so I do plan on just running this one life staff for an extremely long time. But definitely see what works for you, see if you have any preferences, but this is what's worked for me really, really well. Now for the Flail. I am only one perk off from being exactly what I wanted, but I did craft this actually this morning because I had to wait for my chromatic seal. I did go full con so I could transfer it around to different builds if I needed to, but it has Keen, Blessed, Mending Vortex. Now, Keen was not obviously my first choice. My first choice in replacement of Keen would have been Refreshing Move. So then I had Refreshing Move, Blessed, and Mending Vortex. It did not work out that way, obviously, but Blessed, Mending Vortex, I have to say as a healer, I don't think I will not run those two perks now. I was very, very hesitant on Mending Vortex. The crafting mod was very, very, very expensive compared to any of the other craft mods I was using. But now that I've tried it and tested it out, it is really, really nice. So for every 2 hits with Vortex, you'll heal for 45% of the base weapon damage. So it is a pretty massive heal when you add the Bless, plus you get the healing from the Vortex itself. So your self-healing from your Vortex, especially if you have Divine on your amulet, just goes up tremendously. So I do recommend Mending Vortex, but if you can't get it, at least get Blessed, because you are going to want to get those outgoing healing a little bit higher. And yes, the Flail can do a lot of damage as a healer, but in my case, I'm using it for more utility, so therefore I didn't focus as much on the damage output, but more survivability as well as outgoing healing. So that is the route I went. I don't run a diamond in it. I do run the opal, because a lot of times when I'm using it, I'm dodging in, use an ability or two, and then dodge out. So I'm never really full stam when I'm using it. And honestly, I'm not usually full health when I use it either. So it is kind of tricky, because a lot of times, like with a Void Gauntlet, I'll still run a diamond just because like my orb will do a lot more healing when I'm full health. But on this weapon, I'm not going to do that, because again, most of the time when I'm using it, I'm not full health or anything like that. So the opal has seemed to work best. As for your heart rune, now with the heart rune, I have 2 different options that I like to run: PvP and PvE. PvP, I will run Bio Bomb almost exclusively with this build. I absolutely love Bio Bomb. It's really, really good. The disease, the exhaust, everything on it is just fantastic. For PvE, if I'm by myself and let's say I want to go and farm big mobs and just huge groups or whatever, farming globs, anything like that, I will then run the Primal Fury. And essentially what I will do is I will drop all of my heals and then I'll pop that and you'll be able to clear through most mobs pretty quickly. Now, again, mine is leveled up to 700, so I do get, more damage and I get the grit, but I do recommend the grit if you don't have it. The grit is fantastic, especially if you're a healer, because you, again, drop those heals, just start swinging. You heal up pretty good, but do watch your health with the grit because it's easy to kind of ignore your health and all of a sudden you are taking way too much damage. But that's kind of what I wanted to go with for Heart Runes. And honestly, for this gear, I wanted a build that is PVPVE. We finally have this option to make PVPVE builds that are good for both sides of it. Now, obviously for PvP, there are going to be PvP specific perks that can be better than this in certain situations, whether you're looking at shirking heals, anything like that. But honestly, I wanted a build that was good for both sides of it. Now, obviously, you can also see I don't run a lot of artifacts. I only have the chest piece, but that's because, yes, artifacts are really good, but they're not necessarily always going to be best for every single build. So do keep that in mind when you're looking at the artifacts and all that they're not always going to be the absolute best to slot one artifact in every single slot as far as, weapons, armor, jewelry. For my build currently, I'm only running one. That could change down the road if I start changing the build up, but currently this is what I really like. All right, so that was a lot getting into the gear. Next, let's go take a look at the attributes, and then we'll hop into the mastery after that. Okay, so next we are going to go over the attributes. Now, this is a really, really easy attribute layout for how I like to run it. Currently, the way I have it going, and I do have a food buff going right now, so I do have a 48 con food buff going. So essentially what you're going to want to do if you want to run it just like I am, your con is going to be at about 152. And then when you pop that 48 con food, that's going to bump you up to 200 con, because at 200, then you're at least getting that extra increase to your physical and elemental armor. Essentially, the rest is just going to go into focus. Now, if you are running a lot of magnify, do make sure that you put the majority of your points into focus right away and then into constitution. Otherwise, the magnify will be kind of fighting you on it. So I do suggest doing focus first. Get your focus leveled up fairly high, and then do your con, because again, that magnify is going to go with whichever attribute is higher. And if you start with the con, all of your magnify is going to stack into it. And currently they don't have the magnify split. So they consider the magnify just item buffs. They don't actually call them like, magnify buffs, anything like that. So you can see it says 126 item buff and then 48 item buff. I know that it's my food causing the 48, and then that is the magnify, but I know it's really confusing for a lot of people. So just as a heads up, if you're doing, like a heavy build where it's going to be heavy into one attribute, definitely put a few extra points into that heavier attribute before you do your other ones, and you'll have an easier time getting your attribute layout. All right, next, let's take a look at the mastery. Okay, so we are looking at the mastery here, and we'll start with the life staff, and we'll just do a quick kind of rundown of it. So this is my Splash of Light build, and again, I do plan on doing a life staff build in the future where I show various different life staff builds that I like to run and kind of some of the options. But for now, I'm just going to show you my Splash of Light build because this is currently my favorite build to run. I've been having such a blast with it, especially with my new life staff. So what I end up doing, and again, to make the most of my life staff, there is one perk that you absolutely need to make sure that you have if you're running a Purifying Breeze build, and that is the Mending Touch. Because your heavy attacks now remove one debuff when passing through an ally. Well, every time you send that heavy attack, you are going to be removing those debuffs, and then with those debuff removals, you will be healing at the same time. So pretty fantastic, because then your lights and your heavies essentially are healing. Now, the rest of this build is pretty straightforward. This is actually the same build that I ran in Season 2 for the most part. I didn't really change a whole lot with it, but I'll let you kind of look at this, take a screenshot, anything you want. But again, I will be doing a life staff video where I'll probably do the different life staff builds that I like to run, so you guys can kind of pick and choose which build fits your playstyle best. Okay, next, let's get into the Flail. Now, this Flail build has not changed since I hit 20 because I've been so happy with it. I really haven't changed anything. There's only one wasted perk on it because I do not run a shield with this build. I don't run a shield as a healer because I like to play a little bit more aggressive sometimes, and the shield reduces some of my armor and stuff, and just overall I don't really utilize the shield at all when I did try it in the PTR and stuff, so I just removed it, gave myself some extra armor all the time with, you know, just a medium chest, and we are good to go. So you can see my 3 abilities here. We are running the Arcane Smite, Vortex, and Trip. Now I was hesitant on Trip at first when I was playing around with it in the PTR. I was kind of like, well, as a healer, I should really go Arcane Eruption, and you definitely can go with Arcane Eruption. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think for PvE, Arcane Eruption is actually really, really good. But there are some definite benefits to Trip for both PvE and PvP. So let's go over that a little bit with this really quick. So when we're looking at Arcane Smite, and again, this is all going to lead into Trip. I'm going to go over the build and explain kind of why we run Trip. When we look at Arcane Smite, we are essentially leaving that area behind. It's applying a weaken and all that, right? So we get the cooldown reduction. This is our one wasted perk because we don't run a round shield or run shield at all. And then we do run it all the way down to make sure we get that frailty and all of that. But the big thing with the Arcane Smite is it is going to work with our Trip, because with the Smite, it's applying this weaken, right? So as we apply a weaken to an enemy with that circle especially, and then when we hit them with a Trip, if you have at least this 3rd perk, when you're hitting a weakened target, Trip will inflict 15% rend for 5 seconds on the target and granting 15% fortify on self for 5 seconds. So if you lead with an Arcane Smite and then follow up with a Trip, you then get a 15% rend on the target, 15% fortify on yourself, thus increasing your survivability, decreasing their survivability. And then when you get this follow-up heavy, it does make a big difference. Now, I did do some testing with the heavy attack from Trip as another option for you for your Flail, and that is the Trenchant Strikes or Trenchant Crits. Any of the Trenchant abilities seemed to be proccing off of this because the game does consider that follow-up attack as a heavy attack. And I have found, like, when we were testing it with Trenchant Crits, the damage definitely went up. I did not test it with the other Trenchant abilities, but Trenchant Crits, it definitely was noticeable that it was working. So if you wanted to run a Trenchant ability on your Flail, I do recommend it. You will do more damage with your Trip based on the testing I did. But again, I only tested it with one of the Trenchants, and it was Trenchant Crits, and it did work. Now, for the rest of the build here. So that is why I go Trip. Trip works great for PvP because it is obviously you're applying a rend, fortify, you're able to peel for yourself in a sense or catch people with it. For PvE though, it's mainly the rend and the fortify that you're really going to get out of it. And then if you're solo PvE, you're then able to use that as a CC to help you out even further. So PvE, PvP, I think Trip is fantastic. But again, if you are more of a PvE player and you don't really care about the rend and fortify, you're not as aggressive with it, then definitely run Arcane Eruption, because down here is where you're going to get your chain heal. And that really is good. If you do want to go for just all out healing, all out cleric side, like, by all means go with this because it's really, really good. I'm just a more aggressive player with my Flail, so that's why Trip works a lot better for me. And I like having a little bit of the peel. You do get a slow with this, you know, it's a 40% slow, so it's a pretty massive slow. You can still use it as a little bit of a peel and stuff, but again, Trip is just what I've liked. See what works best for you. Okay, so there's kind of the layout of the abilities. Let's look at some of the passives now, because a lot of you probably know what the abilities do. You know, you're doing your healing with your Vortex, and then with the Mending Vortex, you get extra healing for yourself when you get 2 hits, plus the Blessed, you're getting outgoing healing increase. So the overall healing from your Vortex is pretty massive with it. So for passives, I do go with the cooldown reduction, so 1% cooldown reduction when hitting a target, so we do still get a slight refreshing move in a way. It's not obviously great, but if you do end up getting one that has Blessed, Mending Protection, and refreshing move, you are golden. That is what I will eventually be working towards, but it is going to cost me a lot of money that I don't currently have, so that is what I ended up going with for my Flail. But if you do, again, if you have refreshing move, it's pretty awesome with it. Happy Flails, hitting a target with a basic attack within 3 seconds of using an ability will inflict exhaust, reducing stamina regeneration rate by 15% for 5 seconds. Now for PvE, you do not have to run this perk by any means. If you would like to run something different, I suggest the Vital Embrace. It works really, really well for PvE or PvP, but for PvP, I do think that the exhaust has a little bit more value out of it. It may not be the absolute best exhaust, but it is an exhaust regardless. If they're running Nimble, you're essentially just disregarding that Nimble now. And bringing their timing on their dodges to a different time. So you're just kind of messing with their stam regen. But again, PvE, you don't have to. Since I go PvE and PvP with my build, I just leave it on all the time. I know it's a little bit wasted for PvE, but honestly, it's not noticeable. But again, if you're full PvE, go with the Vital Embrace. All right, then we go with the Spiky Impairment. I really like this because being hit or blocking a hit from a melee attack while above 90% health inflicts a stack of impairment. So essentially, like if we're standing in our heals and we get hit, we're going to be able to apply that impairment, which is really, really nice because then they are weakened. That can stack up to 3 times. It's a pretty massive weaken if it does stack to 3 times. Then we go with Leader of the Pack. When no allies are within 5 meters, all flail attacks deal 10% more damage. So essentially, if we get caught out on our own, we are able to hold our own a little bit easier, do a little bit more damage. On the flip side, when we are near our allies, then they're doing more damage, essentially being able to help us, help push all that. So I think Leader of the Pack is fantastic. I don't think you can really go wrong with running it. And then at the very bottom, we do run Better Together. I mean, it's just extra healing. It's not, you know, fantastic. It's not like an OP amount of healing. It's every 3 seconds, 16%. Not massive, but it's definitely, you know, nice to have just extra ticks of healing happening passively like that. All right, then on the right tree with Bastion, we only have 2 of the passive perks here, but we do go with Vital Suppressant, so we did need to run one or the other here, and I chose Vital Suppressant, so while at above 50% health, reduced damage taken by 4%, so we are getting a nice damage reduction. It is not a Fortify, so our armor is not going up. This is like old Fortify, where it's a reduce in damage, overall damage taken, from my understanding of it, all right? While below 50% health, reduce the attacker's stamina damage dealt by blocking by 10%, or while blocking by 10%. So if you do run a shield, it's beneficial in that sense as well. But for me, being that I don't run a shield, the above 50% reduced damage is massive. Like, it's really, really nice to have that. You're not going to necessarily notice it necessarily, but it is nice. You know, 4% isn't a lot, but it can be enough to save you. And then for the last passive perk, we do increase our max health by 25% of our physical armor rating while the Flail is equipped. So this is just an overall, like, why not just have your HP buff type of a deal? Again, it's a perk that I don't think you can go wrong with by any means. But yeah, so this is the build though that I have loved. It's been working so well for me for both PvE and PvP. I have run a couple dungeons with the build, and honestly, it's not too bad. I do think that Void Gauntlet in a dungeon is still a little bit better for the way I like to play, but at the same time, depending on the dungeon, like Lazarus or something, like having an extra strike damage with all that may make a big difference. I don't know. I haven't done a whole lot in the dungeon side of things with the Flail, but overall, I'm really, really happy with the build. All right, so next I do have a little bit of gameplay that I will show from some OPRs. I don't have really any PvE gameplay, but I do just have a few clips so you can kind of see some of like the vortex in action with the mending vortex and stuff like that. You can kind of see some of that health regain and just some fun that I had in OPR. But definitely enjoy some gameplay. All right, that is going to do it for today's video. So thank you very much for watching. I do appreciate it. I know that this video took a bit longer for me to get out than intended, but I did want to make sure that I had all my gear at least set and like happy with it and not still wearing like some of my 625 gear. So it took me a little bit longer than expected to get it all together, but I'm really, really happy with the build with where it's at right now. There's still a few things that I could tweak with it and improve, but overall, it is in a really good spot for what I wanted. So if you do like this video though, please do give it a like. It does help me out a lot. And if you do want to see more videos like this, especially with all the build videos that I do have coming eventually once I get all the gear straightened out, definitely subscribe to the channel so you are notified when those videos go up. And then please do stop by a stream over on Twitch, because I do stream throughout the week and I work on builds live, do chest runs, stuff like that. And we would love to have you hang out, chat, lurk, anything you like. We do have some fun over there. But that is going to do it for today's video. So until next time, I'll see you guys later.